now, from the great state of Mississauga in Ontario, Canada, it's the Ted Wallachin Podcast. Brought to you by ATP Canada, providing estate administration with ease. ATP Canada. And Tom's Place, for the finest in men's fashion. Tom's Place will suit you. And now, here's Ted.
Thanks so much, Becky, and thank you, everybody, for tuning in to the latest episode of the Ted Wallachin Podcast. I am he, you are you, and we appreciate you being here with us. My special guest this week is an actor, comedian, writer, and the recipient of 8 Canadian Screen Awards, including 2 for Best Host and 6 for Best Writing. He plays Constable George Crabtree on CBC's hit series Murdoch Mysteries, and is writer, producer, and host of CBC's Still Standing, which begins its 9th season Tuesday, September 26th. Jonny Harris, welcome. It's a real pleasure meeting you, and I thank you for taking the time to be with us.
Well, thanks for having me on, Ted.
And congratulations on your upcoming 9th season on Still Standing, and you're coming up to season 17 on Murdoch Mysteries, which is incredible. Were you with Murdoch Mysteries from the beginning?
I was, yeah. I was, well, it depends what you call the beginning. There was, as you may know, there was a couple of made-for-TV movies that were first one based on the books. But then when Shaftesbury decided to make the TV show, it was sort of a restart, and everybody was recast. But yeah, since then I've been George Crabtree from episode 1.
That's cool. You got to be one of the busiest men in Canadian show business right now, I think.
Yeah, make hay while the sun shines, I guess.
Exactly, and an historic 100th episode coming up in this season from, I believe, Dawson City in the Yukon Territory.
That's right.
You know, I was looking over all the different towns that you've visited over the course of the 9 seasons of Still Standing, and sadly, some of them have been, ravaged by fire and various devastating acts of nature and some acts of human beings. When you see this in the news and you look back and what comes to your mind?
Well, I mean, it's heartbreaking. I think probably the first one was Lytton in British Columbia, and
right.
I mean, I think it was burned beyond. I don't think a rebuild is in the cards. So yeah, but I mean, that town was also so badly razed that it was. There were very few things when I was watching the news. There was very few things that I recognized, just because nothing was really, none of the structures were recognizable. But it's, yeah. I mean, I don't know what to say about it. It's heartbreaking.
How do you go about choosing the towns? I would imagine that once the show premiered, after about the first few episodes or so, when it caught on, that towns just started inundating you with requests to come.
Well, some people do write in and elect their town or name a town that they know well, that they think would make a good episode, and we welcome that and have chosen many episodes based on suggestions. But we've got a researcher who does a great job looking at towns, and then we've got some story producers who look over it, and we're looking for a certain size of a town, and we're looking for a survival story. We're looking at a town that's overcome some adversity and has overcome some struggle and has a survivor story to tell, and then beyond that, we're sort of looking for. The town has some interesting history. I mean, my worry was in the early days of the show was that it might become repetitive rather quickly, and that has not been the case at all. It's once you sort of chew into a town and get its unique story and some of the unique history, they all seem to have their own personality and their own story to tell.
Was there some trepidation at first by some of the towns when you first began the program, thinking that you were coming in with a camera crew and here comes this comedian and he's going to be mocking us and making fun of our town?
Yeah, Ted, I thought there would be, but there really wasn't. I think, something I've been saying for a long time, I think small town people are proud without being precious. And I
Right.
don't think people and maybe it's, showing up under the banner of the CBC, you can sort of surmise that I'm not there to completely, berate and roast people. But yeah, in a way, I think it becomes pretty evident pretty quickly that I'm there to point out what's, cool and fun and optimistic and unique and inspiring about a community. And so people, I find the more sort of insular the town is or small, the more pride they have and the more eager they are to share that story with you. So yeah, I wondered if people would be, okay, who's this guy and what's he going to
Yeah.
do? But I was always, yeah, even in season one, I was amazed that people were just sort of there to like take it in and have a laugh.
Well, you're from Pouch Cove in Newfoundland, correct?
Yeah, well, Pooch Cove,
Pouch Cove.
spelled
Okay.
pouch, pronounced pooch, and no one really knows
Okay.
why.
Okay. Well, it doesn't matter. So you obviously have an affinity for small towns, having grown up in a small town. Tell me a little bit about Pouch Cove.
Well, Pooch Cove is about the size of 2,000, and I went to school there and played a little bit of softball, and I was part of the uh, I went to scouts and whatnot in Pooch Cove. It was kind of weird though because I lived in an area that had been called a town called Shoe Cove, which then amalgamated with Pooch Cove. But Pooch Cove sort of refers to the actual cove part of the town, which I was a bit removed from. So I was always a little bit of an outsider in various ways. Also, my dad was British and a philosophy professor at Memorial University, which also so I was always kind of like one of the boys, but not one of the boys in a weird
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then, my dad was British, so I wasn't really a Bayman, but then I transferred to school in St. John's and then compared to the sort of preppy kids in the school in the East End of St. John's, I was completely a Bayman, and yeah, I was always sort of a black fish in a way, a black sheep.
Yeah. Okay. I think most people would concur with me when I say that people from Newfoundland are considered to be the friendliest of Canadians. Why is that?
I don't know. Yeah, I mean it's a good bunch. I think the East Coast in general is very friendly, and I think there is something about being poor and being friendly that also sort of can go hand
Yeah.
in hand. And I think for a long time, uh, Newfoundland was a sort of economically down and out place, and but I think along with that also comes comedy. I mean, I think that's why people
Yeah.
there are friendly and funny. It's like super friendly, but also saucy. We come from a culture of sauciness, and more with each other than we are to outside. I think we go easy on the visitors, but
Yeah.
we're happy to have them.
Is the idea of doing still standing come from your mind, or was it a collective?
No, it was. Yeah, it was. I got hired for the gig. It was a thing that CBC, a format that CBC had been looking at for a bit, and yeah, I think I was one of a few people, comedians considered for the job.
Hmm.
But when my agent told me about it, and he didn't know much about it, but he sort of gave me the blurb in like two sentences, and right from the get go, I thought, man, I really want that job. And then we shot, and then eventually I went in for a few interviews and I got the job. We shot a pilot which was okay but not great, and it was sort of sat on the back burner with CBC for a year and a half. And then before they junked it, I think they took a bunch of things they had on the scrap heap and focus tested it, and our pilot actually tested pretty well. And then we
Hmm.
got the green light for season one.
The show is described as being part travelogue, part documentary, and part stand-up comedy. Was it always designed that way? Were they looking for a stand-up comedian to be a part of that mix at the outset?
Yes, yeah. That was always the case. There was a little bit of talk about whether the stand-up routine would happen just at the end of the show,
Hmm.
or would it live as it does now, where it sort of gets spliced in and narrates the show.
Right.
But that was always the plan to have a stand-up comedy show.
Where is the most fascinating place? I mean, and this may be a difficult question for you to answer, but of all the towns that you visited, the most fascinating, or perhaps a place that took you by surprise, that you weren't expecting it?
That's a good question. I think there was we did OK Falls, Okanagan Falls in the Okanagan Valley in BC, and
Hmm.
I was which also there was a lot of trouble with wildfires there.
Exactly. I was just going to say.
But it was remarkable. It was, we featured that town, and we stayed in a motel just south of there in a little town called Oliver, and then just south of there is Osuyas, and it's like wine country slash desert. It looks more like California or Nevada than any other part of Canada you've ever seen. And
Yeah,
to me, that was just, yeah, I didn't know it was there. It was remarkable. Um,
complete with rattlesnakes and everything, huh?
yeah, well, the only sign I've ever taken a picture of that says "Beware of rattlesnakes" in Canada is there in
It
Okinawa.
also use. I believe I read that the average temperature in the winter in Osoyoos is something like 1.5 degrees Celsius.
It really is, yeah. Every time I go to BC, it's like, oh, why don't I move to BC? Every time I go there, I think I'm going to move to BC, and then it's like the Men in Black zap my brain, and I forget. And every time I go back, I think, oh Jesus, I meant to move to BC. They don't get the winter, right?
Yeah,
Canada's the coolest country in the world, but the winters are awful. Well, there is a place that has the best of both worlds.
yeah. Now you've taken on some really interesting challenges along the way in your visits to these different towns, and had some interesting adventures. The people have always been really friendly to you, but not necessarily so with animals. Like, did you not get spat upon by an alpaca?
Yes, I almost got kicked in the crotch by an alpaca,
Oh,
very
that would have been nice too.
within a half inch, I swear. And the hoof on that alpaca, its rear leg looked like a steel spring, like a loaded spring. I mean, it wasn't like a kick; it was like it would look like a like a howitzer shooting. It just snapped out and back with lightning fast. If it had hit me, I I wouldn't be here talking to you.
No. And what about? Because I'm reading through the notes here. Some of the episodes I recall seeing, but where here it says you delivered a lamb, you
Yes,
wrestled a steer,
yeah.
okay, and you probed a bull. And I was talking to my producer about that. I said, "What does that mean?"
Yeah, well, that's there
Yeah,
I was it was a fertility test for a bull. And
I
so
see.
as part of this test, you are harvesting a sample of what they call the white gold.
Yeah, okay.
And then and part of the process is, I didn't even know I was doing this. And we were in the middle of the shoot, and somebody gave me a, a rubber glove that went up to my shoulder. And before you knew, I was up to my elbows in bull. And that's part of how they do it, apparently. And
And how did the bull take that encounter?
he enjoyed it. I can, that is, the sample was secured, and so I guess he was okay with it.
I guess because I'm thinking with your encounter with the alpaca almost kicking you where you produce your own liquid gold, that could have been really scary with a bull.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Well, the bull
Yeah,
happened first, maybe for the best.
I see. Okay, is there anything that the producer was wanted you to do that you couldn't do or didn't want to do or wouldn't do? Because I just look at myself like you've been into caves, coal mines, and salt mines, and you wouldn't get me into any of those places because I got some claustrophobia that I deal with.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm pretty game. I always just assume that I'm not a real worrier with that kind of thing, but there are a couple of those people on the team, so I'm just assuming anything that they're going to ask of me is not horrendously dangerous. I think maybe one of the most uncomfortable moments was I was just recently in Alberta. There was a couple from Zimbabwe who own a pie shop, like a handheld savory pie, like a meat pie sort of place.
Yeah.
But they also do this thing called the hot pie challenge, where they take the hand pie, divvy it into 5 pieces with a varying degree of hot sauce on each one, and the last one is like 1.2 million on the Scoville hotness scale or whatever. And I got to number 4, and it was, just painful. My eyes watering, nose running, dizzy, heartbeat. It was insane.
That can be real scary. I mean, there are places that sell those kinds of crazy ghost peppers, etc., where they make you sign a waiver.
Yes,
because it literally could have serious adverse effects. Not just a burning sensation, but you're right. I mean, you start getting heart palpitations, and that's a little frightening.
It was a little bit, yeah. I ended up out in the parking lot traipsing around with a glass of milk and an apple, and I don't really remember getting there, but anyway. And who knew an apple would help, but it did.
Ted Woloshyn returns in a moment.
Hey, it's Ted Woloshyn for Tom's Place. Our fall merchandise is starting to arrive, and we've got massive amounts of summer clothing that needs to be cleared. Blowout prices on virtually everything, like designer suits, regularly up to $5.99, now from $167 to $267. Beautiful sports jackets, starting at only $167, and designer dress pants and shirts, all at $67. Check out our deals throughout the store on the very best of designer menswear. Huge savings off our already below retail prices. If you need a suit for an upcoming wedding or any special occasion, we are Toronto's one-stop suit shop. For the finest outfit for every occasion, there is no better time to find the perfect addition to your wardrobe. Tom's Place is open daily, 11 to 6 weekdays, 10 to 5 Saturday, and 12 to 5 on Sunday. Visit Tom's Place, 190 Baldwin in Kensington Market. Tom's Place will suit you. Have you been tasked with the role of a state executor, or expected maybe in the future you will be? Well, if so, let me make your life a lot simpler by introducing you to my friend Debbie Stanley. Debbie is the founder of ATP Canada. They specialize in estate administration. Their goal simply is to help Canadian executors understand their role and how to deal with the loved one's estate. Let's face it, there's no school for this, but ATP Canada offers services such as executor support, estate accounting, and they have a new online course called Executor Ready. It's an engaging video designed to make estate administration easier and affordable. And those are 2 comforting thoughts during a stressful time. So call Debbie Stanley at 1-866-309-0387. That's 1-866-309-0387. Or you can get her at info@etpcanada.ca. That's info@etpcanada.ca.
If the people who founded this town could see you guys now, they would say something in French, I guess. I wouldn't know what it was. Holy. The lobster fishery is 2 months non-stop going hard and then 10 months off. Sort of like playing for the Toronto Maple Leafs.
When you grow up in a small town in Newfoundland, you see the people have a sense of humor about hard times. I turned that into a career and hit the road.
Mr. Jonny Harris!
Now I'm on a mission to find the funny in the places you'd least expect it. Canada's struggling small towns. Towns that are against the ropes, but hanging in there. Still laughing in the face of adversity.
Welcome to Surrey, PEI.
Now back to Ted Woloshyn.
I'm sure that when your producers go and you have a team that travels to the location before you get there to meet up with some of the local folks and to find out some of the more interesting aspects of their culture and their history. I'm sure that they've been approached by people who thought, you know what, I should be on the show because I have this interesting collection of this, or I do this, or I do this. But the producers are thinking, no, this guy's a little on the wacko side. We got to stay away from him.
Yeah, I would say probably that does happen, and that they sort of keep me clear of that. Like, I mean, yeah, everybody, and it's a shame, like we got 23 minutes to tell a story, so we can only chat to so many people. Usually we'll interview 5 people, but then usually those people are people who can sort of tell a broader side of a community story. So it's not just
Hmm.
them and their personal, it's
Right.
they're talking about maybe their personal experience with the flood evacuation is personal, but can probably relate to a number of people in the community.
And when you traveled outside of Canada once to
Yes.
St. Pierre and Miquelon, right?
Yeah. Right. Right. Right.
How did that come about?
Your stuff, Ted. That was St. Pierre Miquelon, and where I had, despite growing up in Newfoundland, I'd never been to St. Pierre Miquelon, but and it was a little bit interesting as far as needing our passports and whatnot for an episode, which I think had only ever happened before when we did an episode in Campobello Island, New Brunswick, where the privately operated ferry was down, so you had to drive through Maine to get there. Was probably one of our only other passport episodes.
Hmm. Let's take a minute here and talk about Murdoch Mysteries, if that's cool with you. Uh, an incredibly successful show. I mean, a fascinating show with another interesting, unique premise. And you have to sort of suspend your belief at times with some of the historic uh, figures that appear in the program. When that first came along and you were introduced to that program, what did you think of the concept?
I really liked it. I mean, I thought it's classic parlor whodunit murder mystery, and
Right?
but when I read the audition, it said something about George Crabtree sort of being an intimidating guy, like he was the muscle of the group or something. And I thought, oh, geez, I don't have a chance at this. And
Yeah.
but did my audition and did my tape anyway, and then got a call back to go in and do a screen test with Yannick to see if we'd work together at all, and that seemed to go well. And then they were telling me that he's probably going to be sort of more of the sort of comedic sidekick and bring a little levity to the show.
Well, it's interesting because I saw one of your episodes recently where you were about to marry a woman and I think that what she thought was her dead husband suddenly reappeared. And it was a very poignant moment, and it wasn't the kind of a goofy uh, fun loving kind of a character moment for you. It was a pretty sincere moment. Do you remember the episode I'm
I
talking about?
do, yeah, I do, and so Crabtree had sort of become a surrogate father figure to her
Yeah.
son, and it was assumed that he'd been killed, I think, in the Boer War, and then shows up and says like, "Hey, buddy, that's my wife, that's my kid. Thanks for stopping by. See you later." Uh, and then and then he sort of turns out to be a nasty piece of work. But then but as an actor, that's kind of nice. It's nice to be able to try to do a little bit of some more dramatic, earnest stuff along with doing the light stuff.
I think that's one of the things that makes the program work too is the fact that you introduce so many different elements. One minute it's something that's really quirky, and another minute it's of historic significance, and then there's lightheartedness and sort of goofing around, and then suddenly, wham! I mean, a very serious piece of business shows up. I mean, there was another one where a guy was mounted on a telephone pole, and he had a bomb tied up around him,
Yes, yeah.
and he ends up blowing up, and I couldn't believe it. I'm watching this, I'm thinking, what? I did not expect that to happen, with people standing around with blood splattered on them.
I
I
know.
thought, my goodness.
That was pretty, yeah, that was pretty risky for Murdoch Mysteries. But yeah, every now and
Yeah.
then there is, yeah, it can be, it can sort of, but it does, I think it does manage to balance all that stuff. And I think the cast, both the writers and the cast sort of trust each other to go into those areas. I mean, I know
Hmm.
that like sometimes when Yannick or Helene or Tom or whoever has a joke or a funny line in the script, they always nail it. In fact, it makes me nervous because I think like, oh, I'm supposed to be the funny one, and really anybody in the cast can pull it off. But it's yeah, I think it does bring as you say, like a bit of a range and a variety to and a balance to it.
Now, people may not be familiar with the fact that, I mean, you're a multi-award winner, um, from many things, including for your writing, and you wrote and for Mary Walsh's program some years ago. You were a writer on This Hour Has 22 Minutes, one of the classic Canadian television programs. Again, East Coast production. Uh, do you consider yourself to be a writer before a comedian, or you consider the two to be one and the same?
I would say, yeah, one in the same. I think I sort of came at it from a theater background, and then I wrote a one man show, um, and that Andy Jones directed, and it was styled a little bit like sort of same format as the kind of one man shows that he did and does and is good at, and um, so I think, yeah, writing and performing when it comes to stand up are uh, although I do have writers that help write on Still Standing, but
Right.
as far as, yeah, which I would put first, I wouldn't. I'm not sure which I would say.
Now, do you have an opportunity to do much performing, much stand up? Like, I don't know where you could fit it in with your schedule. You're shooting two television programs. Do you have a chance? Do you tour at all?
Yeah, no, I don't really like the irony is I write reams of stuff for Still Standing, but I don't really like my own sort of comedy routine that I would take to a club here in Toronto or on to the Halifax Comedy Festival or whatever. It's just sort of it's got beyond me. I don't really have a routine right now. I'd almost have to start from scratch, which I will do. But right now, I reckon, um, and it is sort of a scene that I missed because I used to do those festivals pretty regularly. But
Hmm.
it's I'm not shy of work, so I can, and there will always be, yeah. Hopefully, that's something I can return to.
Well, you were nominated for a Canadian Screen Award for your stand up special Comedy Now. Um, how long did that take you to shoot, and when was that done?
Completely, I completely forgot about that.
Uh,
You're right. Yeah, I forgot that got a nomination. That would have been, oh my, that would have been like 07 or 08, I want to say. I don't remember. I remember I got a
when
DVD of it. Does that date it at all?
well, no, maybe partially, I suppose. For some reason, they don't. Some people were listening right now don't even know what you're talking about. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It wasn't yesterday, let's just say.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. When did you first consider the fact that show business might be something for you, and that you could actually carve out a bona fide living, whether as an actor, or as a comedian, or as a writer, or as a combination of all?
Yeah, I think, as a young man, I wasn't much good at anything else. And I was a bit of a nuisance to my teachers. I was a bit of a class clown, and I'm sure I had ADD. Just, I got involved in theater, and it was sort of the only thing I was any good at. And I was involved in a play, and a friend of mine who was in the show, my parents I often joke my parents were the first parents in the world to suggest theater school to their kid, because my parents were both had connections with Memorial University in St. John's, and they liked the idea of me going there. And Memorial had a School of Fine Arts on their Corner Brook campus, Sir Wilfrid Grenfell College, and they'd mentioned it to me, and I think they just thought I wasn't showing any promise in any other areas, and then so I'm doing this play, and a friend of mine is like, yeah, I'm going to go and study theater at Memorial in Corner Brook, and I was like, hey, that's what I'm doing too, and then just managed to never look back.
Did you actually graduate?
I graduated, yeah. I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts, Ted. Can't you tell my refined way?
Yes, of course. Well, it probably came in handy when you were probing that bull.
Yeah, exactly.
He that was probably the most educated arm he's ever had inserted into him.
Yeah, if I had my diploma, I could have left it up there.
Yes. Here, how impressed are you now? The ninth season begins on CBC. I've got it written down here. I think it's it's Tuesday, September the 26th.
You got it.
And the 17th season of Murdoch Mysteries begins on Monday, October the 2nd. That's quite amazing. I mean, 17 seasons is an incredible run, and 9 seasons is nothing to sneeze at either in television, because nowadays in television, sometimes shows don't last 9 hours.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah. So you got to consider yourself to be, well, I was going to say consider yourself to be lucky, but I don't think luck has much to do with it at this point. I think it has a lot to do with your talent and your abilities.
Well, thanks very much, Ted. I appreciate that. I think, I'm not sure what to say about luck. I know that timing can be fortunate. I happened to move to Toronto not long before I got the audition for Murdoch Mysteries, and I had done a thing with Mary Walsh in Newfoundland, and it was her agent who took a meeting with me after that and got me the audition for Murdoch Mysteries. So I don't know if I say luck, but I think a few stars have to align for any of us to get along this far. So whatever you want to call it.
Well, what's the old saying that luck is a residue of hard work?
I'll take that.
You can have it. I got to tell you, I enjoy watching you on both Murdoch Mysteries and Still Standing, and I wish you continued luck. I hope you do this for as long as your heart desires, my friend.
Well, thanks very much, Ted, and we'll talk again, I'm sure.
I hope so.
See you now.
Well, that's it for another episode, and thanks again for joining us. Make sure you tell your friends all about us. Make sure you drop by our website as well, www.tedwallishin.ca. We look forward to your comments, positive or negative, and also any questions or suggestions you may have for guests or episodes. So please drop by, and also to check out our sponsors. There are links for both ATP Canada and Tom's Place available on our website. And of course, while you're on your computer, fill out your organ and tissue donation card. You can change or even save a life. Meanwhile, we'll see you next week. Have a great week.
The Ted Wallachin Podcast has been brought to you by ATP Canada, providing estate administration with ease. And Tom's Place, for the finest in men's clothing at unbeatable prices. It's Tom's Place at 190 Baldwin in the heart of Kensington Market. Tom's Place will suit you. The Ted Wallachin Podcast is produced by Becky Coles. That's me. Technical production by Paul Gatt. Music by Bike Thieves. To talk to Ted and for more information on his podcast and our sponsors, go to www.tedwallachin.ca.